Just as COVID-19 is top of mind for everyone, so is the ongoing effect it's having on our mental health, now and for when the pandemic is over. So how are we handling it? Here this morning is Paul Gianfrido, President and CEO of Mental Health America. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you for having me on.
It's good to have you here. I think it's critical at this juncture when we are going through this pandemic of how people are feeling. Are we really handling it as well as we'd like to think we are?
No, we're not. We had a mental health crisis in this country before the pandemic, but things have gotten so much worse during the last year. For example, at Mental Health America, we have an online screening program, and 2.5 million people came and took a mental health screen last year, and more than 1 million more had depression or anxiety than were experiencing it in 2019. So, about half of us in 2020 would have had a diagnosable depression or anxiety. And we really need to get our arms around that because we're going to come out of the physical side of the pandemic over the next few months. But this mental health side is going to persist for quite a while if we don't get a handle on it.
What are the underlying reasons? Is it the isolation? Is it not being able to connect with families? Is it because kids are doing school from home? What's the one thing that you can pinpoint, or if there is one point?
Yeah, there's not just one thing, but certainly loneliness and isolation is a big factor. But in addition, this year, just worries about the coronavirus itself across all age groups, and loss and grief has been more persistent as a result of what people have experienced with so many people dying during this past year. The current events have had a lot to do with the way people have felt in the last year. So it's really been trauma piled on top of trauma that have been affecting people, and it's been affecting our children, 11 to 17-year-olds, most deeply.
And so are people actually afraid to admit that maybe they do have an issue? I mean, when you put the label mental health on top of it, that alone, I think, can maybe have people stop and think, well, I don't want to bring that up.
Yeah, it's very true. For a very long time, there's been this stigma and shame associated with admitting that one has a mental health problem. And it's led to discrimination to a great extent, and different systems, separate and unequal systems that have been built for mental health versus those systems that have been built for overall health. That's why it's been so important, really, that a group of organizations, mine and 13 others, have come together and created this unified vision for how our mental health services system should look from the federal level all the way on down to the local level. If we get together about this, talk about it together, build the system together, I think we'll do a lot to addressing both the stigma and discrimination that's been associated with mental illness over the past generations.
It doesn't seem as though there's any easy fix for all of this, but what are some of the things that you would recommend, that your group would recommend, that people can do to make their mental health healthier?
Yeah, there are some easy fixes. One is screen. Mental health screening should be available to everybody. And, the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force recommends it for everybody over the age of 11, and yet rarely do we get regular mental health screening as part of the physical that an adult gets or the physical that a child gets when we're doing blood pressure screening for adults or vision and hearing screening, for example, for kids. So we can start by taking the same public health approach we take to every other condition to screen and identify concerns early.
And we really haven't seen the total effect of all of this until we are through this pandemic. How worried are you about when we come out of this?
Well, if we don't turn things around, I think we're going to be seeing the tail end of the mental health side of this pandemic, not just for years to come, but probably for decades to come. Often we look only at the most lagging indicator, which is suicides. And we expect to see suicides increase, the suicide rates increase, but usually that doesn't happen for a year or two. And then that honestly continues to happen over a period of decades for people. So addressing this now, addressing the mental health needs related to the pandemic now, is going to save some lives 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, that unfortunately we're going to be grieving if we don't do this.
All right, some good advice. Paul, thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for doing this.
And keep it right here. We'll be right back.